Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to Top 5 Metal Albums of 1987. So what a year for music. The 1980s sound was in full swing, but it was an interesting year because really a lot of the sounds started to blur over. It really wasn't very clear cut anymore in terms of rock, metal, and even glam metal. But I'm doing my best here. This one here being a metal top 5. I have separated out and done a separate top 5 rock albums of 87, and we'll be doing a top 5 glam metal albums of 87. So this one here, we're sticking with rock, and we're going to be talking about career-defining albums, albums that reinvented a sound for the band or enhanced what they had already been doing. They were reputation-securing albums, but these were killer albums of 1987. So join me as I run through the top 5 metal albums of 1987, and we're going to get into it here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with the top 5 metal albums of 1987. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I have done, or I'm going to be doing a separate one for glam metal, and I will be doing, or have already done one for rock, trying to keep all these straight because there's so many to do. But I've also already done top 5 metal albums for 85 and 86, and we're going to try to keep this going throughout the rest of the decade, maybe even beyond. We'll wait and see. But so much great music. And so let's go ahead and get in to 1987 and kick off with the Godfathers of Heavy Metal. So in at number 5, Black Sabbath, The Eternal Idol, 13th studio album, first one to feature Tony Martin on vocals. He was actually coming in and re-recorded vocals that were sung originally by Ray Gillen, who would go on to Badlands and make his name over there. But he had sung and done a tour with Black Sabbath. But this, I don't know, Black Sabbath or Tony Iommi, or maybe it's even Tony Martin, don't really consider this to be the first Tony Martin album because he didn't come in and write the lyrics and do everything with this. He just came in and sang it. But I got to tell you what, man, in my opinion, this is one of the best ones that he did and one of the most solid sounding Black Sabbath albums. Whether you are a fan of the Ozzy era, the Dio era, or the Ian Gillan era, or the Glenn Hughes era, or whatever, this is just a solid Black Sabbath album. I really like it. I think it's worthy of coming in at the number 5 slot, despite the fact that it was not hugely successful, featuring some really amazing tracks on here like The Shining, Hard Life to Live, and Glory Road. Jeff Nichols, their keyboardist, who was never really an official member, just should have gotten a lot more praise because of what he was able to bring to albums like this with his keyboard sound. He was so integral to the sound of Black Sabbath and what they did in the 1980s. This album in particular, I want to give extra special props to Jeff Nichols. God rest his soul. Unfortunately, he has since passed away. But he really made this album come alive, and at least part of the reason why this album, I think, should be coming in at number 5 for the top metal albums of 1987. All right, coming in at number 4, we've got Power Metal Pioneers, Helloween, Keeper of the Seven Keys, Part 1. This was their second studio album after Walls of Jericho, that one being sung by Kai Hansen, but he stepped aside, moving to just lead guitar, and they brought in Michael Kiske to sing, which really elevated this. Not that Kai wasn't great at what he was doing. I think had Kai stayed as the lead vocalist, the band would have done just as fine. But all in all, a great album, and certainly shining an extra light on it vocally for that reason. This change, though, would actually set up their classic era and really help to define the European power metal scene, but also worldwide. I mean, Helloween is considered one of the big four of power metal. Really a band that came out and defined it. And with this album here having the title track, well, there is the title track, but not so much that, it's the theme song or whatever you want to call it, Helloween on here, which was such a defining song, not only of the band, but also of the whole power metal movement. And then you get Future World, A Little Time. Again, just so many great songs on this album, start to finish. There's just nothing bad on here. Each song leads into the next, builds on the next. And when I get to the end of this thing, I just want to start it all over because it's so good. It was a cool thing that they came back with the part two in 1988, and we didn't have to wait all that long for a new album from them. And that album with this album, just absolutely fantastic stuff. But this one here, number 4 for 1987. All right, so coming in at number 3, we've got former Rainbow and Black Sabbath vocalist Ronnie James Dio and his band Dio, Dream Evil, their 4th studio album and first without guitarist Vivian Campbell, who of course would go on to White Snake and Deep Purple, or not Deep Purple, White Snake and Def Leppard. But taking over for him would be Craig Goldie coming from Rough Cut. And we also have another person from Rough Cut coming in, Claude Schnell on keyboard. So 2 different people coming in, really changing up the sound for Dio. Not so much that it wasn't recognizable as who he was, but I actually think that Craig Goldie's coming in, the more polished feel and sound that was brought to them in the production, but also probably because it was 1987, really helped create a signature sound. This album here and what Craig Goldie does in terms of that staccato playing that he is known for really helped to set a career-defining sound for Dio that would be replicated on a lot of albums to come until Craig Goldie would return years later. But this one has some real standout tracks on it, like the opening track, Night People, my personal favorite, Sunset Superman. The singles on it maybe aren't as big as other ones. You have All the Fools Sailed Away and I Could Have Been a Dreamer. Good songs, standout songs, but they don't jump out the way that some of the others do, like Holy Diver and Last in Line and We Rock and stuff of that nature. I felt the other songs, the deeper cuts on this album, do that. And so this album for me still stands up and is still a great album. I just don't think they released the right singles at the time from it. But all in all, a great album of 1987 and an even better one within the Dio catalog. All right, coming in at number 2, we have thrash metal legends Anthrax, Among the Living, 3rd studio album and breakthrough album, marked a real progression in the band's sound and style, but also in terms of their presence in the music industry. They became bigger, they started playing bigger venues, getting more attention. And this album here is harder and faster than previous albums, Spreading the Disease from 1985, which I talked about in my top 5 of 1985. Anthrax has done a lot of great albums, but this one here was produced by Eddie Kramer, who is in no way, shape, or form a thrash metal producer. I mean, he worked with Jimmy Page, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin. Maybe Anthrax hired him because he had worked with Kiss, and they're big fans of Kiss. But I do think that having brought him in an outside ear that was not a thrash metal producer may well be the thing that made this album as great as it is. And it features some killer tracks like Caught in a Mosh, I Am Law, Indians. But again, like most of these albums, it is solid from start to finish on here. And other great tracks that they've been playing, still play live in concert sometimes, like NFL, Nice Fucking Life, or Among the Living, the title track on here. But this album is just so good. It's one of those ones that I think captures a moment in time, making it a truly great metal album for 1987. All right, so we're down to the number one. What comes in at number one? We got through some of the big ones there, so this one might be surprising to some, but then again, I don't think surprising to other people. So, number one, Savatage, Hall of the Mountain King. This was their fourth studio album, but you know, the band went all the way back to 1979 under the name Avatar. So they've been kicking around for quite some time, and this is the album that really came together for them. First album that was produced by Paul O'Neill, who would go on to work with them in many other guises and ways, and ultimately with them doing Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But it really had the band focusing going forward on that theatrical rock sound, integrating that stuff in the mixture of classical in with the metal. This is the album that really started to be the definitive sound of Savatage, that then Savatage would take and turn into Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which is essentially still Savatage. But this album here, all the hallmarks, all the great metal sounds that came before it, and yet not overly doing the theatrical side of it. We got John Oliva and Chris Oliva both doing phenomenal in here, firing on all cylinders, maybe the greatest album they ever made together. And some of the material that's on here would even later be covered by Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Prelude to Madness being one of them, just showing you that even though this might be an underground metal album, ultimately material on here has become part of the music masses for stuff like that, where Trans-Siberian Orchestra is huge, goes around at Christmas time playing Savatage music, and yet most of those people don't even know what it is. But this to me is where it all started, and not only a career-defining album for Savatage, but a music industry-defining album, and a defining album as to where things were going to go in terms of something as big as Trans-Siberian Orchestra. So for all those reasons, but mainly how great this album is, I'm making it my number one album of 1987. So there you go, the top 5 metal albums of 1987. I hope you guys enjoyed it, but what for you was the number one metal album of 1987? Remember, I've got a separate glam metal one and a separate rock one for the year of 1987. So think about just traditional metal sounding artists, but there were so many great ones, right? We could have done a huge top 20, top 50, top 100 probably, because 1987, in my opinion, was one of the greatest years in music, and certainly metal as well. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.